Security, escort this gentleman out, please.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.
Motions before our board, we follow Roberts, except upon review of the full public record and due deliberation among the members of the board, any of its members except the chair may enter a motion. So we may deliberate before there's a motion on the floor. So don't get carried away by the Roberts rules that came to us, okay? The next item that I'd like to do, our agenda contains 2 items today. They're both listed as new business, the Terrace Park quartzite steps reconsideration and the Parkway Apartments new siding reconsideration. My understanding is the Terrace Park quartzite steps are actually a new revised plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we're going to move that as new business, but I'd like, if it's okay with the other members, to take the Parkway Apartments first, which I really believe is reconsideration of a prior action of the board. Okay, we disapproved, I apologize. Last time we voted with, is there anyone here to speak to Parkway Apartments? At our last meeting, the board voted that the replacement of the siding on the apartments at 754 South Phillips Avenue, which is a non-contributing building in the district, would have an adverse effect on the historic nature of the district. If we want to change that vote based on input as to what the standards really are with respect to a non-contributing building, and we've been informed by the state that it's unlikely that the materials on a non-contributing building would impact or would have an adverse impact on the historic nature of the district, we may do so. We would do that by a motion to reconsider our earlier vote. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I would move to reconsider the previous motion, previous action.
Is there a second?
It's my understanding, Chair, just a point of order, that a motion to reconsider can only be made by someone who voted in favor of it the last time, not someone who was opposed. And I don't remember, Gary, what your vote was.
I had left.
Okay.
I had not voted.
That could
That's
be.
my general procedural understanding. You can't move to reconsider unless there is somebody who's actually willing to change their vote from affirmative to negative or negative to affirmative. And if he was not present, then he can't bring the motion.
It would be me or Josh.
Or me.
Did you say?
I voted it had an adverse effect. I think we all did, except for you. So anybody but you or Gary could bring the motion.
Would you like to make that motion?
No.
Okay.
I will make that motion.
We have a motion to reconsider the earlier motion with respect to an adverse effect. Is there a second?
I think anybody can second. Just think the motion has to be brought by someone who voted
I'll second.
with the majority.
We have a motion and a second as to reconsideration of whether or not the siding replacement at 754 South Phillips Avenue has a negative effect on the All Saints Historic District. Discussion.
I stand by our original motion because I believe that the siding as it stands is not historically, doesn't respect the historical integrity of the neighborhood. It doesn't match any of the historic properties that have stayed in line with what is historic. And therefore I am against, I stick with our original motion.
Guess my question is it, if any siding material is appropriate, why does it even come before us if it's not contributing? And what is our role in that then?
Well, I suppose you could reach a point where she didn't, I spoke to Liz too, and she didn't go so far as to say, and I tried to read what I could figure out from this on the standards, and it was not very helpful. She didn't go so far as to say that any siding you would put on a non-contributing building would not matter. You know, she did not go that far.
Okay.
And she said about 3 times in our conversation that it's a decision, it's the board's opinion as to whether it has a negative impact that matters.
I would just say for purposes of discussion that it was not solely the material being used that was the cause for our objection. in my opinion. I mean, my vote anyway, was not just based on materials. It was based on materials, color, and size of the siding. So it wasn't just any one thing. It's that this siding was thicker and wider than everything else in the neighborhood. It didn't match the normal siding that you have in every other house in that neighborhood. And we more than loudly suggested to them if they would match the size of the siding in the neighborhood to be 4 inches rather than 8 or whatever it was, that we'd have gotten our approval. I'm sorry they started this. I'm sorry that it went without a building permit and they threw all this money in, but I am not one to give people permission to make an error and then bail them out of it and feel an obligation to do that. I don't. I don't feel an obligation to bail them out. I'm sorry the mistake was made, but I still feel the same way I felt a week ago.
Other discussion? We have seeing no further discussion, we have a motion for reconsideration of our earlier motion, and all we're doing right now is reconsidering. We'll vote on reconsideration. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Motion fails. Our next item is new business. It is the revised plan for the Terrace Park, quartzite steps. Diane, do we have someone from the city to present the revised plan?
We have Tori Niedema with Parks and Rec, and we also have Chad Tucker with Confluence Architects.
Hi, the floor is yours.
Okay. Chad wasn't able to make it.
Chad is right next to you.
Sorry, Chad's right next to me. I meant the meeting on Friday.
Oh.
It's Friday. I can see him. Anyway, since the last board meeting, I think you guys voted that it had an adverse effect, the construction project that we had slated. We talked to the Terrace Park neighborhood. I think we met 4 or 5 people out there on Friday. Myself and Diane and Russ Sorensen was there, and I think also Dave Fisher. Basically, the crux of the deal was, they definitely want as much quartzite as possible to stay. And I think that was kind of the board's deal too. What we didn't want to do was go against a master plan that had already been approved, but we were looking at a way to compromise. Kind of what we came up with, meeting out there, meeting with some of the neighborhood folks. What we're looking at doing is delaying basically the pieces of the construction project so that we can possibly get this centennial project done in August in time for the celebration. And I guess I can.
Do you want to step up?
Sure. So basically, what we showed before was taking out this diagonal pathway halfway through, and then coming back with the banded concrete here, and then of course we have the banded concrete here. We were showing. I guess there's probably. Do you have that other? Diane, do you have that other? Oh, is there another?
Yeah, that's
Probably an easier one. Yeah, so basically this shows the quartzite pathway that is there right now, the diagonal piece, and then also this piece that curves in, connects into the steps, the quartzite steps, and connects up into the shelter. So what we talked with the neighborhood about was, let's delay any removal here in this diagonal pathway, and then basically wherever we can catch grade as far as building that pathway that goes up to the north and the other exhibit, we would stop any removal past that, and any removal going up to the north as far as possible to get the stuff that basically kind of the plaza area with the centennial marker, and getting our ADA connectivity basically from 4th Street up to the playground and the basketball court. So if you go to that second exhibit, that basically shows what we were talking about. Basically leaving this whole pathway, leaving everything we possibly could here and here, And then revisiting that in the master plan in 2019 when we have our first major construction project out at Terrace Park. Because we basically, before we change major pieces of the master plan, we want all the community that gave us input through the 3 neighborhood meetings that we had in 2014 to be able to voice their opinions as well. And so that's basically what we're proposing.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could you just show me on your map where the steps are to enter the park from Fourth? Right
here.
there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And what is the area that you want concrete over, please?
Concrete over? You
Yeah.
mean remove and
Remove the
replace with
stones.
concrete?
Yes, please.
Yeah, basically, if you go back to that other,
If you could show me on that map, that'd be helpful.
yeah, see, this is the existing, so we're proposing to remove this chunk right here and a small piece here.
Like from
From 4th Street, yeah, this would be basically a new monument sign and one
from
main
Fourth
entrance.
Street, when you
Yeah,
step off the curb,
correct,
you want to cement that.
yes. This would be a new entrance.
Image of what that proposed plan looks like, because the
No, only what John sent me today, that's all I have.
We had it last time, but yeah.
because that sign will be all constructed out of salvaged quartzite.
Salvage quartzite, yeah.
The section with the little curve, it says, at the meeting at the park, you said that you wanted to take it out, and maybe you put it back in, but there's no money in the project to do that. So why are we taking it out at all? Why can't we just take out whatever they need to put their cement piece in?
Okay, I'm gonna, now we're gonna, anyone from the public that doesn't have the floor right now has to ask questions through me. So let the board first ask any questions they may have, please.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna start with one if I may.
you bet.
Is there, when you talk about handicapped accessibility,
Mhm.
and I want to apologize to the board members for, the Vargas quote was right, but it implied that I don't care about handicapped accessibility, and I truly do. I had started by saying I couldn't walk on some of these paths because I have a fused ankle. Why can't you, when you talk about accessibility, why does that little round path need to come out?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is basically provide ADA accessibility all the way from the north to the south. So if you're on 4th Street, and you're trying to enter the park, we don't want you to have to go all the way down, basically to the corner, come back, and up through.
But aren't you putting a path straight down in your
Yes.
drawing?
But can you go back to that other one? Yeah, I mean, that's the path, but if I look at it on this, aren't you going from here to here?
Yeah, basically,
Essentially,
from there to-
so
yeah.
why, and I know that was kind of the question that was starting from the public, why do we need to take the portion out that does not? I mean, can it be put parallel and even with that and go straight from one to the other and leave all that fun stuff?
We're making up so much grade from this corner to keep it ADA accessible with the running slope, so
Okay.
what I mentioned in the meeting that we had, and this, basically because we're changing a lot of stuff on the fly here, so we haven't even got our surveyors back out to check. But what I told them in the meeting was, we would take out as much of this pathway as we needed to basically tie back into the grades, and then everything else would get left. Now, if that means back here, I don't think it'll be quite that far. I think we'd be able to even keep that much. That's what we're planning on doing. But until we get a surveyor out there and get in the field, I couldn't tell you the exact location.
And it's not clear on here, but the end of this round pathway is also a set of quartzite steps and stuff, is that correct?
Two sets
That
of
would be
3
gone.
steps, yep.
So, another question to what Tom was just saying. Why didn't you guys consider perhaps running it exactly parallel and then it just only taking a small section of that curve out where it would cross over it like a bridge? Because the grade wouldn't change that much right next door.
Yeah, but if you're starting from the corner here and doing a switchback, and doing a switchback, there is a lot of grade that you have to make up from this point to that point to keep it all the
Okay.
way accessible. So it's not as easy just
It's not on paper.
just basically keeping and just making a parallel path. You know, we're not ripping it out just willy-nilly. It's it's to keep that 5% running slope so that we don't need handrails on the sidewalk.
And the
So-
steps contribute to that grading problem, I would assume.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. That's the grade that we're trying to make up. You're basically running up 2 flights of steps. Oh, apologize.
Can you go to the other one? The other picture on here. Again, I just want to understand, looking at this, it would essentially run from here to here. So you're pledging to only take as much of this as is necessary for the purpose of doing that. I mean, even though this is all shaded dark purple,
Correct.
it's not your goal to take all of this out. It's just as much
Yep.
as is necessary to make
Yeah.
that straight pathway a possibility.
Yep, we'll basically survey this to the ADA grades, and then we'll tie back into the park so that we can mow it, we can do everything else, and then the rest of the pathway is gonna stay.
And the existing path will Y off of the ADA compatible path at the point at which it can start. Is that my understanding? You could start on the ADA compatible path and then just walk right off of it onto whatever's remaining of this.
Yeah, and we kind of show that in the other piece. Basically what we're showing, and a little something that we talked about too was, once we get to the master plan and revisiting that, we can even connect that pathway, whatever's gone.
I got you. 2 other quick questions then. If this is gonna be the pathway and we're only gonna take out as much of this as is necessary and this is all, why does this and this have to come out?
This is a little plaza area around the picnic shelter. That's where the centennial marker is going. And then it also basically, this piece is kind of that gathering area for the picnic shelter. This is that historical centennial marker that we're putting in. And so basically that little plaza area goes there, and then now these 2 pathways, basically what you're not seeing here that we couldn't afford in this phase is that this turns into a garden area.
Right. Can I ask one more thing? It's just, are you also, just as we're only gonna take as much of this path as is necessary, are you only gonna take as much of this as is necessary to do the plaza area, and then we'll just allow
Correct.
that access? I mean, again, I'm trying to shrink the footprint here, I'm not making any
No,
bones about it, but
I
I just,
understand.
sometimes when you see the colors, it looks like the whole thing's coming out, and I just wanted to be sure that that was not part of the.
Yeah, that other plan sheet, basically,
Right.
this one right here, see, before this was all shown as being taken out.
Right.
So this is how much we're anticipating, but yeah, it just
For
all depends on
purposes of the
grades.
plaza.
Yeah, you have 2% grade or less when you're talking about a plaza.
So I have one kind of general question. So you're using terms like possibly could and would delay, which sounds like after this has been approved, you may just go ahead and do everything you were talking about doing at the last meeting that we didn't approve. So I guess this would be a question for you. Would those plans, when they want to move forward, have to come through this board again? Or if we pass this, could they just go ahead and take these walks out anyway?
That depends on the nature of the motion that we pass and how strict it is with respect to the plans that are in front of us.
Because we were just addressing this corner.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, just to offer it up, I mean, if it deals with the pathways or the steps, because it's on the historical register, it'll have to come back to you.
Okay.
And so, and we've already pledged to the neighborhood that we would, in 2019, when we start the design, we'd come back, revisit the master plan,
Okay.
make sure everybody's on board, because, we'll find out how this area operates too, and maybe there's something that we missed, maybe there's something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of our process. When we're doing a big master plan and we're doing phases like that, we go back and visit with the neighborhood each phase.
Awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, definitely with it being on the historic register, it'll be in front of you again in 2018.
I feel a little bit like I'm beating a dead horse, so I'll apologize. But is that really, is that the only way, are we looking partly at cost effectiveness? Because to me, I'm looking for a way to retain as much of the historic material as I can and still provide accessibility. So in my mind, the ideal would be if we didn't have to touch the quartzite, it was maintained properly, and there was an alternative path that didn't mean, you know, building sidewalks around with the Sioux Falls kind of thing. And have we looked at that? Has the city looked at that?
We went through basically everything as far as circulation patterns and everything with the neighborhood. Basically, I don't know how we could find a direct pathway that wouldn't affect, you know, basically it would mean not using this as your main, one of your main entrances into Terrace Park. You know, and basically when you're putting ADA accessible ramps, you have to have another ramp to go through. That's why we go to the corner. This is a T intersection, so that's where a lot of your, basically your pedestrians are gonna come and enter the park. So that's
Well,
kind
and
of
I
why
think
we're
just
here.
from the park, you're more likely to enter over there if you can use the path, because the parking narrows so much over here, right? Because,
Yeah, I mean, if you live over here, coming as pedestrians, if you live over here, you're not gonna come all the way over here to enter, but, you know, I get what you're saying.
other questions? Chad, did you have anything to add to that?
I guess I've got more information on the grading if that is helpful to you.
Okay.
What I think is important to know is that this existing pathway slopes from here up to this point, and right here, this pathway is 1.5 feet lower than the existing picnic shelter. So if we do go this route, what we would want to do is salvage a couple of these stone stair treads and actually build a small stair from the existing path up to the courtyard piece there. So I think that will help with the accessibility. And then talking about the slope here, well, from this point to the north, we'll be able to match existing grade with the sidewalk. But from this point to these new stairs, we'll have a 4.999% grade, which is the maximum allowed to have without handrails. So this is where we'll really be kind of doing a little, it's not major earthwork, but we'll be digging into the existing grade, because you remember there's a pretty big slope right here now. And so at this point here, the sidewalk will be 1.5 feet below the existing turf elevation, which will blend that in on the sides, but that's where, like Tori mentioned, we'll have to stop that sidewalk or that existing stone pathway somewhere in here, because if we kept it, we'd have basically 1.5 feet drop off from that existing grade to the sidewalk. And I apologize, I wasn't here on Friday, I was out, but I drew the demolition back to that intersection, but like Tori said, if we can stop it, you know, midway and just have a dead end in the turf, that's okay with everybody, that's certainly what we can do. But I think it'd be somewhere in the middle point where it would work.
Well, all the concrete that's going in, will all of that have the pavers on each side?
Just the one piece that's.
I can show you here.
With the black outline.
Correct.
On the other one.
Yeah, if you look on your
Looks
second
cool,
page
but it
there.
doesn't
This
add
one,
anything.
this one's supposed to be
Sorry.
concrete.
No, I know.
Yep.
Not this.
Yeah, no, just this piece. You can see it in your exhibits, the piece with the black. And then when we revisit the master plan, you know, maybe it's a deal where we take this piece of sidewalk that kind of gets that formal garden, makes the boundaries of it, and maybe we do that, and that kind of ties everything together there in that little triangle area.
I would think that it would.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, that would look nice if all three sites had some
Right.
quartzite element.
Yep.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Members of the public who would like to address the plan.
Maybe I'll go first, try and keep it brief.
Okay, and you are,
Nancy Tapkin.
okay, Nancy?
So Tori is correct. About 5 of us met with them on Friday, and we did agree to the items that Tori outlined. Keeping the diagonal path, keeping the courts south and to the west of the picnic shelter, that's the light pink up there. But we also were really strongly voicing the fact that we want to also keep the curve as much as possible. That we feel really strongly about that, as do some of you folks. And I think some of us also agree with Laura that the possibly, the maybe, the revisit language makes us nervous. We absolutely do not want to revisit the diagonal. We don't want to revisit anything. As far as we're concerned, that is not up for discussion going forward. If it's staying, if the vote is that it stays, we don't want to revisit that in 4 years. We want to keep it. And again, we feel really strongly about the curve. Tori has indicated that they will keep as much as possible. Now I see that little straightaway connector though on the new plan, and that, again, is throwing me off a little bit. We don't want that little, I would suggest that we don't want that little straightaway connector. We want the curve, okay? So that said though, I'm gonna read a little bit just because I feel like I have folks depending on me to get this right. So, even though we met and we essentially agreed to the compromise before you, it doesn't mean we're happy about it. It doesn't mean we're enthusiastic. We feel it is our only recourse in this time and at this moment. We don't feel that we have a lot of other options on the table. So yes, we agree, but it doesn't mean it's what we want. It doesn't mean it's our perfect scenario. Also, I just want to say, trying to say this right, in 2014, as John from Confluence mentioned last week, the plan was to take out every single piece of quartz in the park outside of Japanese Gardens, every single piece. So I don't think they understand the park and the neighborhood and the North End and what it means to all of us up there. So I'm really cautious about things. I really want to, regardless of the board's decision today, I really want to encourage Confluence and Park and Rec going forward to, that we're not going to be quiet about any demolition that's coming down the road. You know, it's not just me anymore. It's not just my family. It's not just a neighborhood group. Especially since the articles appeared in the Argus, you can see how full the room is today. My phone has been ringing off the hook with people coming out of the woodwork to say, we're behind you, we want to keep it. So it's not just a small group anymore. I think that's important. Some folks that came out of the woodwork this weekend have great ideas that, you know, we just didn't think of. But there's other great ideas out there for making this the best project possible. We've started a petition. The Argus ran a poll over the weekend. In the Argus poll, 87% of the 146 respondents wanted to keep as much quartzite as possible. That's 127 other people, besides just this group that's coming before you today. So there's a lot of people out there, regardless of the fact that they're in the room or not. We can combine the history of Terrace Park with its future in a better way. I really believe that so strongly. It's absolutely doable, but the other side has to care. The other side has to give a dang. And I strongly, strongly urge Confluence to go back to the drawing board before 2020, or I think you're going to have a fight on your hands. Terrace Park could be your signature historic preservation project in this city if you wanted it to.
Okay.
I think that's all I got.
Thank you. Just one point that I think we should clarify, when they looked at it in 2014, I just want to make sure that we're not painting anyone in a light that
Yeah.
was unfair. It was not on the historic register. Is that true?
Correct.
I mean, and that's a different standard, and it's a different, and it's probably not relevant to our decision today, because again, our decision comes down on, maintaining the integrity of the historic materials, so as not to have an adverse impact on the registration. So, and I appreciate that. Other members of the public?
I'm Councilwoman Teresa Staley, and I just read about this in Friday's paper last week, and I called Nancy up. And something that I'm disturbed with as a council member is when we're talking about master plans being approved, and then we come to the public and say, this is the plan, here it is. And then they feel this energy coming at them to come along with the plan. How many neighbors were involved recently in talking about the plan? I mean, I think our city is changing so much, we can't say what was right 2 years ago is going to be right for today. And so I would like to see, I told Nancy, if this has to come to the city council, I will rally my fellow council members to look at this, because we want what's best for the neighborhood and for the city. And my understanding, this was sent out to how many people to notify them about this? Like just the neighbors that around in that area,
You're
right?
talking the public meetings that we did?
Right.
We did, I think we sent out 500 postcards. We also put it in all of our press releases.
But wasn't it kind of in just a parameter of the?
Yeah, we start
Yeah.
with the park and we,
And so,
Counsel, may I interrupt you just for 1 second? I understand where you're headed here, but our decision is, does the removal of the quartzite have an adverse effect on the park? And so, I
Okay.
understand any concern about the process, but that's really what our focus has to be.
right, but you're also looking at a plan that's being proposed to you,
No,
right? Oh,
our
I mean, you're not
plan is
even-
only,
you don't-
only the removal of the quartzite. That's all that we have any say on in this master plan.
But they want to remove the quartzite. that's
Correct,
what-
correct.
So if they
So-
weren't taking it out, we wouldn't be here, right?
Absolutely.
If that was off the
Yep,
table. Which, I mean, it
absolutely.
could, so that's, but,
Yep,
so it could go off the table.
yep,
And we could go back to
yep, absolutely.
the beginning.
Yes,
Madam Chair,
and your name?
Rebecca Dunn, and I strongly support not removing the paving stones and the quartzite from Terrace Park. One of the greatest charms of our city is Terrace Park. And the greatest charm of the park is the meandering of the quartzite through the park. There was a time when everybody wanted to tear down the pavilion, the old courthouse, the Japanese gardens. I remember all this. And there were courageous people like that are standing here saying, no, let's not do that. We want to fight for the stones. I've been fighting to keep the stones on 6th Street Hill since the day when they wanted to tear them up. My alley behind my home is the only quartzite alley, paving stone alley in the city. And my neighborhood fought to keep that. It was a fight because there were people that wanted to just come in and pave it over so they could get their boats in and out of their garages, etc. Porter Williams came in and lifted every stone, cleaned every one, put them back down, and it is beautifully done. I think, Madam Chair, that this could be done if we hire and retain the right stonemasons. I was over at the park yesterday. Retain the right stonemasons to come in, like Porter did in my alley, and correct and restore those paving stones rather than cement it over. I spent a lot of time in Europe. They have such a respect for their rock and their quartzite. They would never consider something like this in one of their communities, to tear down a historic preserved church or building or anything like that. I think we have such a charming park in Terrace Park, and part is the stones. Now, I wanted to also address the disabilities. From the next street over, I entered 4th Street, but I walked across the park to 5th Street. There's complete accessibility for those with disabilities to come to the basketball court, to the playground area, to the picnic area, whether they're wheelchair bound or whatever. It is less than a block to use that entrance without having to pull up the stones at the main entrance of the park. Now, I agree, they need to be renovated, but to pull those stones out and pave that over, pave the curve, is egregious in my opinion. The charm of any place you want to enter, you want it to retain that charm. You know, whether it's the pavilion or the courthouse or whatever. And to pave over the main entrance with cement doesn't even make sense to me. And it doesn't need to be done. It just needs to be restored properly, like my alley, like the 6th Street Hill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The disability issue certainly is one that's to be considered, but it's not our issue.
It is. I think it would become our issue if the city were to come to us and say that we are required to redo this entrance. And I mean, my reading of the guidelines would suggest that's not the case, but I am definitely not an ADA or a preservation expert. So Other members of the public, please say your name.
Madam Chair, I'm Mary Galinsky. I spent 3 years working on that historic alley. So I do have an interest in those things. And I would like to point out that while the neighborhood, from the point of view of contacting people and so forth, was within 4 blocks of the park, that park is a park for the people who live in the historic district. For Cathedral Historic District, there is no park any closer. So even though the aim of the city is to be closer than that, that's still our park. So we are definitely interested in what does and doesn't happen there. And I served on a citizen committee when they put in many of the concrete sidewalks that are there now. And that, again, was the big issue was, are you gonna take out the quartzite, or should we just put in some connecting cement sidewalks that can provide accessibility for the lady with the baby in the stroller and so on? And they worked on those things. And that's, I don't remember the date, it's been a number of years ago, but it was, the quartzites were a big issue, and it wasn't on the National Register then, and now it is. So it's understandable that it's an even bigger issue now than it would have been when it was just what the people who use the park considered.
Yes, sir.
My name is Porter Williams. I did 6th Street Hill, and I did the alley that they're talking about. And I did go to Terrace Park. I've been in Sioux Falls for about 60 years, and that is really a nice park. And to take that stone out of the park would really destroy the integrity of that park. I can recall a long time ago, a good friend of mine that tried to preserve the house that was in Terrace Park. I think it was the Hattie Phillips building. Peter Ecker, he tried to save that structure, and they tore it down anyway. And they've just been kind of removing the integrity, the history of that park. And you tried to save the Japanese garden, which was fine, but the only thing that's left in the upper part of that park is that stone. You take the stone out, I have a historical society to take care of it. And I mean, it's stone can be repaired. I know it's rough and stuff to walk on right now, and that whole entrance could be repaired, and the path for the handicap can coexist with that whole thing. It just has to be reworked a little bit. I think that Mr. Chad over there, that Chad, they could work out something that would work with the historical part of the entrance.
Would it be okay, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Scott Harrisman. I think that since the paths have been there for 85 years and they really haven't hurt anybody, you said that your guys' decision is based on the adverse effect. I believe that tearing that entire path out, or part of that path out, is an adverse effect. It'd be like taking a historic building and tearing half of it down and building a new structure on the side of it. And that's basically what they're trying to tell you here they want to do. And there is, as many people have pointed out already, there is no real reason to do that. You could tear part of it out, rebuild the stone. Anybody, like Porter or anybody, could come back in, rebuild that stone up to the grade. You'll never know that it was ever redone. It'll fill in and match, and it'll be fine. It's like he said, it's a reworking of the plans. I know I didn't go to the Friday meeting, but Bruce filmed it over here and I watched it. And the ongoing thing was from the city that, well, we hired the contractor, it's ready to go. Come on. The event center itself, I believe, had 2,000 change orders. Okay? Change orders are part of doing work. They're part of contracting. When they build roads in Sioux Falls, change orders are made constantly. It's part of the process. Don't be in fear here that by saying we think it should stay the whole thing and be reworked, that you're screwing up somebody's business or something else. You're not. These people have lots of work. They do very well. they might even make more money. So don't let that change your decision. I believe, leave the whole thing, try to work out something where you don't have to tear it up at all. But like Porter says here, and Rebecca, you could rebuild it up to the grade, make it.
Madam Chair, I would like to ask if you can remind not only the board members, but the public that are here, what the vote was last Wednesday
Last
for the
time,
board.
we voted that the removal of the quartzite would have a negative effect on the integrity of the registration, on the integrity of the materials. And that's what I was just gonna ask, if it would be okay. I'd like to know if there's anyone here that is in favor of removing the quartzite, other than, I understand. They're not in favor of removing the quartzite, they're in favor of the structure that needs it. So is there anyone from the public that's here that feels, because of different reasons that are valid, accessibility, that the quartzite should be removed? Okay, now I'm gonna.
Can I say something though?
Certainly.
Well, again, Chad Cucker with Confluence, and I took offense when you mentioned that we don't care about the park. I lived a block away from this park for 10 years. I went to this park with my grandparents when I was younger than that. So, we certainly deeply do care about the park, and we're not trying to ruin anybody's park or ruin the city. And I think that, 10 years ago, in 2008, we did a renovation of McKinnon Park, which was historic, and I think we did a good job of blending the goals of maintenance and ADA accessibility with historically sensitive design. So again, we take offense to any comment that we're trying to ruin it. And again, as you mentioned, I appreciate it, during the 2014 master planning process, this was not on a national register, so we were balancing all the different groups, especially the ADA group, the ADA review board, and concerns that all those other groups had as well. And since that time, obviously, the historic registry has become more of an issue than it was back then. So we recognize the change, but we certainly want to work together to get a compromise that can make improvements to the park but retain the historic character.
Okay, all right.
So, Peter Gilbertson, and I guess I'm not necessarily in favor of removing all of it. But there are things about the plan that appeal to me. So particularly the entrance. The existing entrance is in pretty rough shape. And unfortunately, they don't have the design here today. But one of the new things in the design is it really incorporates...
What was your name? I apologize.
Sorry, Peter Gilbertson.
Thank you.
One of the nice things about the design of the entrance is that it brings in that Japanese garden motif. And it really helps tie the park together. Because right now, there are basically two parks. There's the Japanese garden, and then there's Upper Terrace, and I thought that element is really nice because it brings in and it lets people know that we're really one park, we're not two separate things. So while I agree with my neighbors about the walkways and the paths, I guess I would be in favor of redoing that entrance to make it more a continuous park rather than two separate parks.
I'm Bruce Danielson. I went out there and looked at the park. I like going there every so often. It's the first park I was ever in when I moved here to Sioux Falls 30-some years ago. And Friday when they were walking around and I was listening to Peter and Aaron and everybody that was with, and I saw some compromises that could be made to that south entrance that I think could actually improve the entry into the park and then retain the curve and the sidewalk as it was. And I really like their ideas. And one of the things that really bothers me about the whole concept of the new plan is now it's like, you know the expression, a beeline. Now there's these straight lines to get places. And Frederick Olmsted, when he would design parks around the idea of the curves and the meandering so that you get lost in your thoughts, you get lost in the feel, and he would use natural stone wherever he could to make you feel more part of the earth that you're with. And so when I looked at this plan and I look at the park, and then I look at what I understand the master plan is to be in the future, and I see the removal of all of these things that bring us back to that historical piece that is Sioux Falls. This is the last real treasury of the way things were done in days of old. And I know with Porter's skill, because he taught me how to lay these stones, I know with his skill, we would be able to go in and raise the stones that need to be raised. We could go in and fix that entrance. Like Peter, I liked some of the ideas of tying the Japanese gardens into that entry, but I don't think we need to go in here just because we have a party coming up, rip all 80 years out of here and start all over again and then hope that someday it's going to come back. I really think it needs to be essentially dropped at this point and let the Parks Department go in with Confluence and really have a discussion now that the town knows that we really do care about this park and we want to see as much preserved, that a couple of months will save 80 years. And these treasures that'll be lost forever. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So, I mean, I know there might well be other comments or whatever that people have. I just wanted to know if people felt comfortable allowing us to vote on this plan. I know some people have to leave. That shouldn't be the primary consideration. I'm not
Well,
trying
and
to
I think at a
censor
point here, we're
anybody.
going to lose a quorum, but I am gonna ask, and if you aren't adding something new, because we are gonna lose our quorum here. We had no idea when we scheduled this special meeting, and we can certainly reschedule. You know, I don't mean to cut, but if you're just voicing support, trust me when I say we got it. I mean, we got it. When if you pay attention to the vote last time, we are very concerned about the historic nature of this park. But if you have something else to add, I don't want to cut you off. I don't want to cut you off, Bob. You know, but if you're just voicing support for keeping these steps, trust me, we understand that concern.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Robert Colby. One thing is that in Sioux Falls, we have many public parks. Each has their own temperament, and what makes that character of that park. McKinnon doesn't look like Sherman doesn't look like Terrace, but when you get in each of those, they have something that is different, that makes you feel comfortable there. And ADA sometimes can be a red herring. You just have to provide accessibility. It doesn't have to be accessible to all the places, because you don't have to be accessible ADA to the top row and the fifth balcony. You just have to provide access. And you want to maintain the temperament of this park, please do so. Thank you.
Okay, unless someone has something to add that hasn't been voiced by one of their neighbors, I think we're gonna bring discussion back up here to the board.
Who wants some discussion on the board?
I would like to reiterate what you said last time, that our job is to make sure that it doesn't have an adverse effect on the historical nature. And so I support the way we voted last time, because I think we continue to look at the exact same thing. Even though it's removing less, it's still historic nature of what exists.
You know, you said at one point, Dixie, one of your comments was to see if we could retain as much as possible or make that a philosophy, and I even contemplated sort of using that verbiage in a motion, but I can't. I just think you guys gotta start over. I think there's a way to do this. I mean, and there is technically ADA compliance, whether you like it or not, from the east entrance that gets to as much of this park as a person needs to. I get it. I'd like went all the way through the park that was ADA compliant, but I'd only want to see it if it didn't destroy the essential temporal nature of that park. So I understand. I think everything we've done today has set people backwards from that, but I don't care. I want to make sure that it's done right in the best way possible, and that's the way I'm going to go with this until I see something that doesn't harm that park a bit.
It seems a little inconsistent to celebrate the history of the park by removing lost historic features, but are we ready for a motion?
I would move that the amended plan for the modification of Terrace Park has an adverse effect on the historic nature of the park.
I second.
We have a motion by Tom and a second by Laura that the amended plan for the quartzite path in Terrace Park has an adverse effect on the park. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Move to
Any
adjourn.
other business to come before the meeting?
Well, I'd like to make one really quick short, so Confluence started on this in 2014, like he said, before it was on the registry. So I think that we feel bad that the
Right,
timeline and
I don't,
everything, but
I
think they
didn't, I
do
don't
great
think the
work.
board feels that the city
No.
was not considerate of neighbors' comments. I don't think that we are making that. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all so much. Thank you, neighborhood. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, folks.
Y'all come back now. Cheers.
What kind of morons run this outfit?